More of President-elect Donald Trump's picks for his administration were on Capitol Hill Monday. Defense Secretary picked Pete Hegseth, Director of National Intelligence picked Tulsi Gabbard, and his choice to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, all met with Republican lawmakers to try and firm up support. In a wide-ranging interview on NBC's Meet the Press, Trump was asked if he would use Patel and the FBI to investigate his political enemies.
Do you want Kash Patel to launch investigations into people on that list?
No, I mean, he's going to do what he thinks is right.
Do you think that's right? Do you think that's right, sir?
If they think that somebody was dishonest or crooked or a corrupt politician, I think he probably has an obligation to do it.
CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins me now. Thank you for being here. I want to play a bit more of what Trump said when asked about President Biden possibly pardoning some of Trump's critics. Let's listen.
Cheney was behind it, and so was Benny Thompson and everybody on that committee. For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
How serious are members of the House January 6th committee taking this comment?
Good to be with you. Members of the House January 6th committee, which investigated the Capitol attack and President-elect Trump's role in a pressure campaign to overturn the 2020 election, remain on edge. In fact, based on my reporting, some of the members of the committee and associates of that select committee have sought out legal counsel to help to navigate these political and legal waters in the weeks and months ahead. They do fear possible scrutiny from the Justice Department and the executive branch and from the congressional branch, especially from House Republicans come 2025 when Republicans are effectively running all of Washington. But as we saw in the president-elect's recent interview on NBC News, he is not making any explicit promises in terms of using his newfound power come next year to target them in any way, though he's open to having some kind of legal challenge brought forward should there be a belief inside the Justice Department that there might have been some kind of criminal activity. So we're in a vague zone in terms of exactly what's going to happen, but that hasn't settled any of the apprehension.
And Bob, just to pull on that thread that you were saying, these members are seeking legal counsel not because they think they did anything wrong, but because of these vague areas that we now find ourselves in.
Because they see a prospect of possible scrutiny or even prosecution because of the comments made by not only President-elect Trump, but some of his allies.
I want to ask you about Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's National Intelligence Director pick, who was on Capitol Hill Monday. Her trip comes at a time when her past stances on foreign policy are getting added attention, particularly her decision to meet with Syria's Bashar al-Assad in 2017. Let's listen to what she told CNN following her visit.
Initially, I hadn't planned on meeting him. When the opportunity arose to meet with him, I did so because I felt it's important that if we profess to truly care about the Syrian people, about their suffering, then we've got to be able to meet with anyone that we need to if there is a possibility that we could achieve peace. And that's exactly what we talked about.
Obviously, this is coming to light as Assad has fled his country and his government collapsed. But remind us the criticisms of her and that meeting and whether you're hearing any renewed concerns.
There are not renewed concerns inside of the Trump transition. In fact, there remains firm support for the former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence in 2025. There is hope among those close to President-elect Trump that she will be able to win over all Republicans in the Senate, even though her statements on Syria and Assad have, of course, drawn criticism from bipartisan sources in the past few years. All this is to say, what you saw in that comment from Congresswoman Gabbard in that clip is a proclivity toward engagement with those who are foreign leaders who might be highly controversial, seen as dictators, authoritarians, people who have very questionable human rights records. But this reflects how President-elect Trump sees foreign policy, very much driven by the individual, by personality, by the ability to make a deal. So her position might make her an outlier when it comes to traditional foreign policy making, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but it does not make her an outlier in Trump's orbit.
Pete Hegseth has also come under extreme scrutiny. We got some more statements of support from him from senators today. What are you hearing from the Trump team about how confident he is in his picks and their abilities to get confirmed?
My conversations with sources close to President-elect Trump show that there is confidence in his ability to keep fighting, They know that his nomination still remains a variable in the transition process, but the fact that he's willing to keep engaging with senators, including those who have their skepticism about his readiness for this role of being head of the Pentagon, running the Defense Department, he has a dogged personality and presence that Trump likes. And so you're seeing right now an ability of Hegseth to stay in the mix, to not be any way swayed by some of the criticism. And he is continuing to have President-elect Trump's support, which Trump has reiterated in interviews. You don't see Trump necessarily whipping support for Hegseth at this point. We're still early in this process.
Robert Costa, thank you.
Thank you.